I remember that night like it just happened yesterday. The ocean was unusually still, but the ship was alive with the hum of engines and distant laughter from the deck above. I had just returned from the late-night buffet, a plate of cold chicken in my hand, when I noticed the flickering lights in the hallway. At first, I thought it was just a power surge, but then I saw her, a crew member, standing perfectly still near the stairwell, staring at the wall as if she could see something I couldn't. Her uniform was spotless, but her posture was wrong, stiff, like she was waiting for someone or something. I tried to shake off the feeling and walked faster, telling myself it was nothing. But every few steps, I caught glimpses of movement out of the corner of my eye. Shadows shifted too quickly, and doors that should have been closed were slightly ajar. I passed the cabins, peering in just out of habit, and for a moment, I thought I saw someone crouched on the floor, head bowed. The lights flickered again, and in that brief darkness, I could swear a hand had brushed my shoulder. The eeriness wasn't just in the dim corridors. Even the sounds were off. Footsteps echoed behind me in a rhythm that didn't match mine, and faint whispers seemed to drift through the walls, almost like someone was rehearsing a conversation. I wasn't supposed to be awake, wandering these hallways alone, yet something compelled me forward, curiosity mixed with fear. The further I went, the heavier the air felt, like it was pressing against my chest, slowing my breathing. When I reached the end of the hall, near the service elevators, I found a door slightly open. Behind it, the cleaning crew had left their supplies, but something on the floor made me stop cold. It was a small pile of discarded items, wallets, watches, a phone screen cracked in half, but no one was there. And then I noticed the smell, faint but unmistakable, iron, sharp, like blood. My stomach dropped. I couldn't tell if it was real, or if my mind was tricking me. I turned to leave, but the hallway behind me seemed different. Longer, narrower, and the lights, once flickering, now shone steadily, highlighting a shadow that stretched across the walls toward me, moving even though no one was there. That's when I realized I wasn't alone, and I might never have been. I tried to convince myself to ignore it, but the uneasy feeling clung to me like wet clothes. Every time I passed the hall mirrors, I caught glimpses of movement that didn't belong, shapes vanishing when I turned my head, reflections that seemed just a fraction too slow. I started noticing things that didn't make sense. A cabin door ajar that I was sure I had locked, towels folded neatly on the floor in places they shouldn't be, and notes slipped under doors with nothing written on them except a single word scratched in jagged handwriting. Watch. At dinner the next night, the tension didn't ease. I sat across from a couple who were nervously whispering, glancing around as if afraid someone would overhear. When I tried to ask if they were okay, they smiled too tightly and quickly changed the subject. Something about them was wrong. Later, while walking back to my cabin, I noticed the same crew member from the hallway earlier. She was wiping down a railing, but she didn't look up or acknowledge me. Her silence felt deliberate, like she was letting me notice her, but not enough to feel safe. It wasn't just people. Even the ship itself seemed to shift in ways that made my stomach twist. Hallways that felt familiar one minute seemed unfamiliar the next. I would swear I had taken a certain turn 100 times, only to find the corridor stretched farther than it should. The emergency lights would flicker at odd times, throwing the walls into sharp, unnatural angles that made shadows dance. I started sleeping with the cabin door locked, the chain drawn, yet I kept waking to the faint sound of someone, or something, breathing outside. One night, I heard whispers through the vent above my bed. They were quiet at first, so soft I thought I was imagining it, but then a name was called. Mine. My pulse jumped, and I sat up, straining to listen. The voice didn't belong to any crew member I recognized. It had no tone of warmth or friendliness, just cold, deliberate, almost satisfied. I froze, clutching the blanket, listening as it faded into silence. Even my own possessions started betraying me. A jacket I had hung neatly in the closet would be crumpled on the floor. My phone would show notifications I hadn't received. Sometimes, I could have sworn I felt eyes on me, even in empty lounges or deserted decks. Every time I looked over my shoulder, there was no one there, but the feeling didn't go away. I began doubting my senses, questioning if I was imagining it all. Yet every tiny inconsistency, the misplaced cup, the silent crew member staring, kept piling up. The dread was no longer just a feeling. It was a presence, thick in the air, waiting for the moment to show itself. A door slamming somewhere behind me, sharp enough to make my heart lurch. The sound echoed in the empty corridor, followed by footsteps that weren't mine. I froze, straining to listen. They were soft at first, hesitant, but then quickened, chasing me, matching every step I took. Panic set in, cold and heavy, pressing against my chest. I tried to run, but the hallway seemed to stretch endlessly, walls closing in, shadows twisting in shapes that made no sense. Then I saw it, the cabin door at the end, my own, wide open. My stomach dropped. I had locked it, chain and all. Something, or someone, had been inside, rifling through my things. Papers scattered across the floor, my bag unzipped, contents dumped like a casual warning. I picked up a phone, and the screen lit up with a single message I hadn't sent. I'm here. I stumbled backward, heart hammering, and that's when I realized I wasn't alone. The crew member from before appeared at the far end of the hallway, her face calm, almost unnervingly blank. She didn't move toward me but watched, like she was studying me, waiting to see how I'd react. I opened my mouth, but no words came, only the strangled sound of fear. Then I heard it, a whisper, so close it felt like it was inside my head. You shouldn't have come out. My legs gave way, and I fell, hands scraping against the cold metal floor. The shadow behind her shifted, and suddenly the hallway was filled with figures emerging silently from the walls, each one watching, waiting. My chest ached, breath coming in ragged gasps. Everything I thought I knew, the ship, the people, even my own senses, had turned against me. I scrambled to my feet, desperate for an exit, but the doors led nowhere. Every turn I took, the shadows followed, and in that moment, I understood. The danger wasn't random. Someone, or everyone, knew I was alone, knew how to make me feel trapped, exposed, hunted. I wasn't just scared. I was completely, utterly powerless. I finally made it to the deck, the night air sharp against my skin, but the sense of safety didn't come. The hallway behind me was silent again, almost as if nothing had happened, but I knew better. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip my phone, and I kept checking the locks on my cabin door, as if that tiny barrier could keep the nightmare out. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night, just sat in a corner, listening to the creaks and hums of the ship, every sound making me jump. By morning, some things were gone, my wallet, a few personal items, even the small journal I always kept by my bed. No one mentioned them, no one admitted to seeing anything. The crew went about their duties with polite smiles, but I could feel the same silent gaze, the same calculated distance, like everyone was holding a secret I wasn't meant to know. I tried to talk to other passengers, but they avoided me, some even giving strange, pitying looks, as if they thought I was overreacting or imagining things. That only made me more paranoid. Every step I took felt observed. Every glance from a stranger carried suspicion. I left the ship at the next port, but the unease followed me. Even days later, I replayed every hallway, every whisper, every shadow in my mind. The fear didn't vanish, it lingered, a low hum at the back of my skull, a constant reminder that the world can be much colder and stranger than you ever expect. Even now, months later, I can't stop thinking about that night. I replay the hallways, the shadows, the whispers over and over, trying to make sense of it, but there's no logic to hold on to. I keep wondering if someone was really following me, or if my own fear had shaped the events. Part of me knows the ship wasn't just a vessel. It was a cage, a place designed to make you doubt yourself, to watch how far fear could take you before you broke. I stopped trusting people easily after that. Every glance, every quiet movement makes my skin crawl. I don't know if the crew ever targeted anyone else, or if I was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. I sometimes wonder if the things I saw were deliberate, or if the ship itself, its routines and secrets, was enough to terrify someone who wasn't paying attention. The worst part is the uncertainty. I still check my locks obsessively, even in my own home. I still hear faint echoes of footsteps that aren't there, feel eyes where no one is looking. I carry the memory of that night like a weight, heavy and uncomfortable, a reminder that some dangers aren't obvious until you're already trapped. Sometimes I think about returning, trying to prove I imagined it all, but then I realize I don't want to know the truth. Because maybe the truth is worse than the fear, and maybe, just maybe, someone is still watching. The first time I realized something was off, I was leaning against the railing, staring at the black water rushing past the ship. It should have been peaceful, the kind of quiet that makes you feel safe. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I told myself it was just the shadows cast by the lights along the deck, or maybe the wind playing tricks. Still, every time I glanced around, there was this flicker of movement in the corner of my eye, like someone standing just out of sight. I had joined the cruise with a friend, thinking it would be a relaxing escape. The first night, we went to the bar laughing over cheap drinks, the music and chatter masking that underlying tension I couldn't explain. When we stepped out to the empty upper deck, I noticed a man standing near the lifeboats. He wasn't part of the staff, and he didn't look like he was lost. He just watched. Every time I moved, his eyes followed, always calm, never blinking too fast, never smiling. It made my skin crawl. Later, back in our cabin, I found a note slipped under the door. My name was written across it in shaky handwriting. That was it. No explanation, no threat, just my name. I tried to laugh it off, but my friend noticed my hands shaking and asked if I was okay. I didn't tell her. Something in the air felt wrong, like a storm was brewing inside the ship, unseen but unstoppable. And for the first time, I wondered if I had stepped onto a ship that wasn't just floating on water, but floating on secrets I wasn't meant to uncover. The next day, everything seemed normal on the surface. People laughed by the pool, kids ran through the hallways, and the crew moved with their usual efficiency. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was always just behind me. I started noticing little things, doors that were supposed to be closed left slightly open. My shoes moved when I was sure I'd left them in the corner, and sometimes my phone would light up with a notification I hadn't received. At dinner, my friend and I sat across from a couple who smiled too much, laughed too loudly, and never seemed to take their eyes off me. At first, I told myself I was imagining it, that my fear was making me paranoid. But when I went back to our cabin later, I found the same couple lingering near the elevators, pretending to look at a map, yet their heads turned every time I passed. The realization hit me like a punch. I wasn't just imagining things. Someone was following me. That night, I tried to stay in my cabin as long as possible, locking the door, chaining it, and drawing the curtains. But even there, I couldn't feel safe. Faint scratches at the door frame, the hum of the ship masking the faint sound of footsteps just outside. It was relentless. I started to check every vent, every corner, every shadow as if the walls themselves were hiding someone. My friend tried to reassure me, but when I told her what I was hearing, she looked at me with a mixture of fear and disbelief. One particularly quiet night, I woke to a soft tapping at the door. My heart raced, and I pressed my back against the wall, listening. The tapping grew louder, more deliberate, and then it stopped. Minutes later, a folded note slid under the door. I opened it with trembling hands. Written in messy, jagged letters were 3 words: I know everything. I dropped the note, shaking, and for the first time, I realized the danger wasn't random. Whoever, or whatever, was on this ship knew me, knew my routines, my habits, my fears. By the 3rd day, I couldn't eat properly. Every step I took, every glance I made, every reflection in the polished floors or the windows made my stomach twist. I started hearing whispers, so soft I could barely catch the words, but the tone was unmistakable, deliberate, patient, watching. My friend noticed my change, but she couldn't understand the suffocating dread that followed me like a shadow, growing heavier every time I turned around and found no one there. The ship, once a dream of escape, had become a maze, and I was the prey. I was walking toward the observation deck late that night when I heard it, a low, deliberate tapping echoing down the empty corridor. My stomach dropped. My legs moved on autopilot, but my mind screamed at me to stop. The closer I got, the louder it became, until it was a rhythm, almost like someone counting, just for me. I rounded the corner, and the lights flickered, throwing the hallway into uneven shadows. That's when I saw him, the man from the lifeboats, standing perfectly still at the end of the hall, eyes fixed on me. I froze, realizing too late that every instinct screaming at me was right. My friend wasn't there, no crew member intervened. Just him. And then I noticed movement behind him, shadows that shifted unnaturally, like other people emerging from the walls themselves, silent and patient. My breath caught in my throat, my chest tightening as I stumbled backward. I could feel their gaze pressing into me from every angle. I turned to run, but the hallway seemed longer, narrower, stretching in impossible ways. Doors that should have led somewhere were just walls. My cabin, my safe space, was gone in my mind's eye, replaced by corridors designed to trap me. I heard whispers around me, calling my name, mocking me. The man moved closer, step by step, deliberately slow, forcing my panic to rise. I tried to scream, but no sound came out, only the sharp echo of my own, almost casually, like he'd been waiting for me to realize the truth. That I wasn't safe anywhere on this ship. That I had been under surveillance from the moment I stepped on board. The shadows closed in, relentless and patient. I felt utterly trapped, powerless, a small creature in a vast, cold machine designed to make me crumble. And in that moment, I understood. the terror wasn't an accident. It was calculated, and I had no idea how, or if, I would ever escape it. I finally stumbled onto the main deck, the cold night air slapping my face, but relief never came. The sound of the ocean should have calmed me, but all I felt was hollow panic. My hands shook as I tried to steady my breath, checking my cabin door again and again, even though I knew it wouldn't help. Every creak of the ship, every distant footstep made me jump. I didn't sleep, not really, just huddled under the thin blanket, listening for the faintest sound that might signal they were back. By morning, I noticed items missing from my cabin, my journal, a few personal belongings, even a small camera I had brought to record the trip. The crew acted normal, smiling politely, answering questions with vague, rehearsed lines. No one mentioned the missing items or the strange events. It was as if they were all in on it, or maybe they didn't want to admit that something terrible had happened under their watch. I tried talking to other passengers, but most avoided me, some offering awkward, worried glances, as if I were imagining everything. The tension weighed heavily, not just in the corridors but in the air itself, and by the time the ship reached port, I was exhausted, tense, and hyper-aware of every shadow. The fear didn't leave me when I disembarked. It clung to me, a constant whisper at the edge of my mind, reminding me that what happened on that ship didn't end when I walked off. Even now, long after I left that ship, the memory stays with me like a shadow I can't shake. I replay the hallways, the flickering lights, the whispers over and over, trying to make sense of it, but it never fully makes sense. Part of me wonders if it was all in my head, but then I remember the notes slipped under the door, the misplaced items, the way he watched me so calmly. That part was real. I've stopped trusting strangers easily. Every time someone follows me a little too closely or glances my way, my pulse spikes. I keep imagining that calm, silent gaze from the man at the end of the hallway, waiting, patient, knowing exactly what I fear. The cruise should have been an escape, but instead, it became a lesson in how quickly the ordinary can turn dangerous, how someone's presence alone can make you feel powerless. Sometimes I wonder if anyone else experienced the same thing, if the crew is trained to watch, to wait, to exploit fear without anyone knowing. I don't want to know the answer, but the thought lingers like a quiet itch I can't scratch. And every now and then, when I hear the faint creak of a floorboard or a tap at the door, I can't help but wonder, what if they're still out there, watching, waiting, knowing, and maybe, just maybe, the terror is far from over. I remember the moment. It started like it was yesterday. We had been hiking all day, the sun just dipping behind the trees, turning the forest into a dark, endless sea of green and shadow. I lagged behind the group, listening to the crunch of leaves under my boots and the occasional bird call that felt more lonely than natural. That's when I noticed it, a figure standing between the trees, perfectly still, barely visible in the fading light. I blinked, and it was gone. I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination, that the shadows were playing tricks, but the feeling didn't go away. Every time I stopped to catch my breath, I thought I heard footsteps that weren't mine, soft, deliberate, keeping pace with me just beyond sight. I told my friends nothing, but the unease gnawed at me, a low, constant pressure at the back of my skull. By the time we set up camp, the sun had fully disappeared, leaving the forest dark and quiet. We laughed around the fire, trying to shake off the strange tension, but I kept glancing into the trees, seeing movement just at the edge of the flames. When I went to grab water from the small stream nearby, I felt eyes on me. I spun around, but there was nothing, just the black forest, swallowing every sound. That night, lying in my tent, I realized it wasn't just the dark that made me afraid. It was the certainty that something was out there, watching, patient, and maybe even waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. And the more I thought about it, the more I understood. In this forest, I wasn't just lost, I was being hunted. The forest didn't feel the same the next morning. Even in daylight, the trees seemed to lean closer, shadows pooling unnaturally in corners, as if the woods themselves were aware of me. Every step I took, I felt the same pressure, the same weight of eyes I couldn't see. My friends laughed and joked, but I noticed the way they occasionally glanced over their shoulders, hesitant, uneasy, like they too sensed something. Small things started piling up. My backpack, packed neatly the night before, was slightly open, items shifted or missing. A trail we had carefully marked with tape and ribbons appeared altered, some markers gone, others bent at odd angles. I tried to brush it off, telling myself animals could have done it, but there was a deliberate pattern, almost taunting. Later that afternoon, I wandered slightly off the path to find a better view of the river. That's when I heard it, a soft rustling, deliberate, following me from behind the thick trees. My heart thumped so loudly I thought it might give me away. I spun around, catching glimpses of movement, shadows that moved against the wind, shifting in ways no animal could. I called out to my friends, but my voice sounded weak, swallowed by the dense forest. By evening, the tension had become unbearable. The fire we built seemed fragile against the immense darkness of the trees. Whispers, or maybe the wind, brushed past my ears, repeating sounds I couldn't place, almost like voices calling my name. I couldn't tell if it was real or my mind cracking under pressure, but every instinct screamed at me to leave, to get out before whatever was out there got bolder. When I tried to share my fear with my friends, their faces went blank, their laughter faltering. One of them insisted it was just nerves, that I was imagining things. But then another friend whispered that they'd seen something moving near the treeline, a figure standing perfectly still, watching us. My stomach dropped. The forest was alive in ways I couldn't understand, and now I wasn't just afraid. I was being stalked. That night, I couldn't sleep. The fire had burned low, casting long, flickering shadows across the tents. Every crackle of wood, every snap of a twig outside, made my heart lurch. I thought I heard someone, or something, moving deliberately between the trees. My pulse thumped in my ears as I unzipped my tent, peering into the darkness. Then I saw it, a figure tall and unnaturally still, standing just beyond the firelight, partially hidden behind a tree. My throat tightened, and I froze, hoping it wouldn't notice me. But it did. It tilted its head slowly, deliberately, as if studying me, counting my fear. My friend stirred, half asleep, unaware of the danger inches away. I grabbed a flashlight, shining it toward the figure, but the light hit nothing. No one was there. Yet the feeling of being watched intensified, heavier now, almost physical, pressing against my chest. I backed into my tent, trying to stay quiet, but then I heard footsteps crunching on the dry leaves, circling us. Whispers came next, faint, just at the edge of hearing, murmuring my name over and over. I scrambled to gather our things, heart hammering, panic clawing up my throat. Suddenly, a branch snapped directly behind me, and I whirled around, empty space. But the sense of presence was overwhelming, almost suffocating, and I realized the forest wasn't just around us. It was inside me now, filling every corner. I felt it, something brushing past my shoulder, fast, deliberate, almost playful. I stumbled, heart racing, lungs burning, realizing we were not just lost. We were being hunted, guided deeper into the dark. The whispers grew louder, overlapping, mocking. Every step forward made the shadows behind us closer, more solid. I understood then that escape wouldn't be easy, and that the forest, alive and patient, had already claimed its hold on us. We didn't sleep that night. Every sound, the rustle of leaves, the distant crack of a branch, made us flinch. I kept checking the treeline, expecting to see that figure again, but nothing moved. Still, the feeling never left. It lingered like a weight on my chest, a quiet, constant reminder that we weren't alone. By morning, some of our gear was missing. Water bottles, a small pack of snacks, even one of my friend's jackets had disappeared. No one admitted taking them, and no explanation made sense. The forest felt different in daylight, not safer, just more patient, like it was waiting for nightfall to continue. Every shadow seemed to stretch longer, every rustle of leaves sharper, deliberate. We tried to follow the marked trail back, but it had changed. Ribbons we had tied were gone or bent in strange ways, and we constantly ended up circling the same area. My friends' faces showed worry now, the joking and laughter from earlier completely gone. I could see it in their eyes, the same fear I felt gnawing at me, the same suspicion that something, or someone, was still out there, just beyond sight. When we finally made it to the edge of the forest, relief should have washed over me. But instead, I felt hollow, tense, and hollowed out. The dread we carried didn't vanish. Even leaving the forest behind, I could feel its presence lingering, an invisible hand pressing down on my shoulders, reminding me that the terror wasn't over. It had simply followed us home. Even now, I can't forget that forest. Every shadow, every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig brings me back to that night. I replay the figure in my mind, the deliberate, patient way it watched us, the whispers that seemed to echo inside my own head. Part of me wants to believe it was imagination, that fear twisted reality. But the missing items, the altered trail, the way the forest seemed alive, that part is real. I've stopped going on hikes alone, stopped trusting the quiet of nature. Even when I'm in a crowded city, my pulse jumps at small noises, at sudden movement. The fear I felt in that forest didn't leave when I walked out. It stayed lodged deep in my chest, a reminder that some places are alive in ways we can't understand. I sometimes wonder if that figure is still there, if it follows other hikers, patiently waiting for someone unaware enough to wander too far, too carelessly. I think about how easy it is for the ordinary to become dangerous, how quickly control can slip away when something else is watching, learning, waiting. And sometimes, late at night, I hear a faint whisper in my apartment, the echo of leaves or a shadow moving just beyond sight. I can't shake the thought, maybe it never really left, and maybe the forest, patient and relentless, has found ways to follow. And if that's true, what chance do we really have of escaping it? The rain started slowly at first, a soft tapping on the roof, barely enough to notice. But by the time I stepped outside to check on the car, it had become relentless, a constant drumming that made the world feel smaller, heavier. Streetlights reflected in the wet asphalt, stretching long and crooked across the puddles, and the wind carried whispers I couldn't place. I thought I was alone, but I wasn't sure anymore. I had parked near an alley to avoid the traffic, and as I locked the car, I thought I saw someone in a dark doorway, hunched and motionless. I blinked, and they were gone. The street was empty, save for the rain, but that sense of being watched pressed down on me, cold and sharp. Every step I took toward my apartment felt louder than it should have, echoing against the walls of the buildings, giving away my presence to someone. By the time I reached the lobby, soaked and shivering, I kept glancing over my shoulder. Shadows moved just at the edge of my vision, nothing solid, nothing real, but enough to make my pulse spike. The elevator doors closed behind me, sealing me inside, and for a moment, I thought I was safe. But when the doors opened on my floor, the hallway was darker than it should have been, the light flickering, and I noticed a door slightly ajar. It wasn't my apartment. My heart skipped. I had locked every door before leaving, and yet something or someone had been here waiting in the storm, patient and deliberate, leaving a trace I couldn't ignore. The rain outside was no longer just weather. It was a mask, hiding the predator in plain sight. The rain didn't let up. Each time I stepped outside to check on the apartment entrance, the street seemed darker, longer, more twisted than it should have been. I kept hearing footsteps behind me, soft but deliberate, following the rhythm of my own. Every time I spun around, there was nothing, just the reflection of the streetlights in the puddles, stretching like claws across the wet pavement. Inside, things started to feel off. My shoes were no longer where I had left them. The lock on the back door seemed slightly loose, and small items I had left on the counter were moved just enough to be noticed. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I had been careless, maybe the wind shifted things, but the nagging feeling of being observed didn't fade. It pressed on me, growing heavier every time I heard the rain tapping against the windows. That night, the apartment felt alive. The shadows cast by the flickering hallway light seemed to stretch unnaturally, reaching across walls, curling toward me. I kept glancing at the front door, expecting to see it move, expecting to see someone standing there, watching, waiting. Then came the whisper, faint and deliberate, sliding along the edges of my hearing, my name. I froze. My hands shook, my heart thumping in my chest, and I realized the sound didn't come from outside. It came from inside. I called a friend, trying to sound normal, but my voice wavered, betraying my fear. I walked from room to room, checking every corner, every closet, every space where someone could hide. But there was no one. And yet, every instinct screamed at me that I wasn't alone. By midnight, the whispers grew clearer, the footsteps louder, circling, pacing. I could feel eyes on me, even when I was certain the apartment was empty. I started questioning my own mind. Was I imagining it? Losing it under the storm's relentless roar? But then I saw it. A shadow slipping past the edge of the living room window, moving with intent. My chest tightened. The fear wasn't just in my head anymore. It was real, and it was here. I couldn't breathe. The shadow outside the window moved closer, slow, deliberate, almost taunting. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone, my only connection to the outside world. I backed into the corner of the living room, trying to stay out of sight, listening to the rain hammer against the glass like a drum, masking the soft, deliberate footsteps that now echoed through the apartment. Then the door creaked. Not a gentle creak, the kind an old building makes, but a long, tense groan, like it had been forced open. My heart slammed against my ribs as I turned, expecting the figure from outside, expecting the worst. But the hallway was empty. Only the shadows stretched long under the flickering light. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, that I was imagining it, but the hairs on my neck stood on end, and my instincts screamed otherwise. The whisper came again, clearer this time, almost in my ear. "I see you." I froze. My breath caught in my throat. Every muscle in my body wanted to run, to hide, but my legs refused to cooperate. Then came the faint sound of movement in the kitchen. Objects shifting, subtle but deliberate, as if someone was rifling through my things without care, but with intent. Panic surged. I grabbed a chair and swung it toward the hallway, my voice shaking as I shouted, but no answer came. Then I saw it, out of the corner of my eye. A figure moving against the darkness, deliberate, patient, almost playing with me. My chest tightened, my lungs burned. I understood then that there was no escaping this. Every step I took was anticipated. Every move I made was being watched. The storm outside, the rain, the darkness, all of it had become a shield for whoever, or whatever, was in my apartment. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't just afraid. I was trapped. Completely, utterly trapped. By the time the storm began to ease, I was a wreck. Every sound, the drip of water from the roof, the faint hum of the heater, made me jump. I stayed huddled in the corner, clutching the chair like a shield, convinced the figure could return at any moment. Sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined shadows slipping through the cracks of the windows and doors, circling me. Small things confirmed my fears. The lock on the front door had been tampered with, drawers slightly ajar, personal items moved or missing. There was no sign of the figure, but the absence didn't bring relief. The apartment felt different, smaller, heavier, like it remembered the fear and kept it pressed against my chest. I tried to reach friends and neighbors, but every attempt to explain what had happened felt absurd. How do you tell someone that your own home, your safe space, became a hunting ground? People nodded, offered polite concern, but I could see the disbelief in their eyes. Even after the storm ended and life returned to normal, I carried the fear with me. Every rainstorm now sends me into a spiral of panic. Every shadow, every sudden noise, reminds me of that night. I left the apartment soon after, but the dread didn't leave me. It has become part of me, a constant reminder that danger can hide in plain sight, and that sometimes, even your home isn't safe. Even now, the memory of that rainy night stays with me. I replay the shadows, the whispers, the deliberate movements in my mind, over and over. I tell myself it could have been imagination, that the storm and darkness played tricks. But the tampered locks, the missing items, the sense of being watched, that part was real. I've never felt safe in my own home since. Every time it rains, my chest tightens, and I double-check every lock, every window, every corner. I've stopped leaving doors unlocked, even for a few minutes, and the idea of being alone in an apartment at night fills me with dread. The fear didn't stay that one night. It followed me, lodged in my mind, a constant reminder that even ordinary places can become dangerous without warning. I sometimes wonder if whoever, or whatever, was there ever really gone, or if it waits, patient and silent, for the next storm, the next night, the next person careless enough to leave a door unlocked. I think about how quickly our sense of safety can dissolve, how vulnerable we are when we assume familiar spaces protect us. And sometimes, when I hear the first drops of rain on my roof, I can't help but imagine those same deliberate steps, the same whispers calling my name. I don't know if I'll ever feel truly safe again. And the worst part, I'm not sure I want to find out if it's still out there, watching, waiting, knowing I can't escape. The first night on the ship, everything felt larger than life. The lights sparkled along the decks, music drifted from the lounges, and passengers laughed over drinks and dinners. I should have felt excited, but instead there was a tight knot in my stomach, an unease I couldn't explain. The corridors were long and winding, and every time I turned a corner, I had the sudden irrational sense that someone was just out of sight, watching me. I had come on the cruise with a small group of co-workers, hoping for a break from our hectic jobs. That first evening, we explored the upper decks, taking in the ocean under the moonlight. I remember glancing back and seeing a man leaning against the railing, far away, yet his gaze seemed to follow me. I blinked, and he was gone. At the time, I dismissed it as coincidence, but the feeling didn't leave. Later that night, I went back to my cabin to grab something I had forgotten. The hallway was unusually quiet, the kind of quiet that makes every sound louder. That's when I noticed the doors, slightly ajar, almost imperceptibly, just enough to catch the light differently. My cabin door was locked, but I could swear I heard a faint shuffle inside. My pulse quickened. I stepped back, heart hammering, and that's when I noticed it. a shadow moving across the deck above, slow, deliberate, as if it was studying me, timing me. My skin prickled. I realized then that the ship, with all its crowds and laughter, could feel utterly empty, and I was not alone. The next day, the unease didn't leave me. The ship was bustling with passengers, laughter, and music, but I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on me. Every glance toward the railings, every shadow in a lounge, made my stomach twist. My coworkers joked and explored carefree, but I kept noticing odd things. Doors that should have been closed left slightly open, chairs in the lounges slightly moved, and the faint sound of footsteps that didn't match anyone's pace. By afternoon, I started noticing the same crew member in different areas, always just at the edge of my vision. She was polishing railings, delivering drinks, or standing near staircases, but every time I looked, she seemed to vanish when I blinked. My coworkers laughed when I pointed it out, calling it coincidence, but I couldn't shake the feeling she was following me. That evening, I went to the observation deck alone, needing air. The ocean stretched endlessly under the moon, waves breaking softly against the hull, but the peace was an illusion. I caught a flicker of movement near the lifeboats, someone standing perfectly still watching. I blinked. Gone. My heart raced. I felt trapped on a ship that was supposed to be a vacation, but now felt like a cage. Back in the cabin, I found a note slipped under the door, my name written in shaky, jagged letters. No explanation, no threat, just my name. The air felt heavy, almost suffocating. When I called the front desk, the crew member I had been noticing earlier answered. She smiled politely, voice calm, but something in her eyes made me freeze. Recognition, almost satisfaction. By nightfall, the paranoia consumed me. Shadows moved where there should be none, whispers threaded through the corridors, and I began noticing doors along the hall slightly shifting, as if someone had been inside waiting. My coworkers started noticing my anxiety, but they couldn't see what I saw, couldn't feel the deliberate presence stalking me through the corridors. The ship was alive with it now, patient, calculated, waiting for the moment I would realize I had no escape. I was halfway down the empty hallway, clutching my bag like a shield, when I saw him, the man from earlier, standing at the far end, perfectly still, eyes locked on me. My stomach dropped. Every instinct screamed at me to turn and run, but my legs refused to move. The lights flickered above, throwing jagged shadows across the walls, stretching him impossibly tall and menacing. Then I heard footsteps behind me, slow, deliberate, matching mine, keeping pace, though no one was there. My breath came in short, ragged gasps. I spun around, but the corridor was empty. I ran, heart hammering, toward the stairs, toward any exit, but the ship seemed to twist around me. Doors that should have led somewhere now opened onto walls. The hallways curved and stretched, endless and disorienting, trapping me in a maze designed to isolate and terrify. I reached the observation deck, thinking I might escape, but the man was there again, leaning casually on the railing as if he had been waiting. Shadows shifted behind him, figures emerging from the dark corners, silent, patient, watching my every move. Panic rose like bile in my throat. My bag slipped from my hands. I was cornered, exposed, utterly powerless. Then came the whisper, soft but deliberate. You shouldn't have wandered alone. I froze. My mind raced, trying to understand, trying to rationalize, but nothing made sense. Every step I took, every breath I drew was anticipated. The ship wasn't just a vessel. It was a hunting ground, and I was prey. At that moment, I realized that no one would save me. I was entirely at their mercy, trapped in a nightmare built from shadows, silence, and observation. A nightmare that didn't end when I wanted it to. I stumbled onto the deck, rain soaking me, heart pounding like a drum. The cold wind did nothing to calm me. The sense of being watched pressed down harder than ever. Every creak of the ship, every distant laugh or murmur, felt amplified, like it carried hidden intent. I didn't sleep that night, huddled in a corner of my cabin, listening to the hum of the ship and the faint echoes of footsteps that weren't mine. By morning, small but telling signs confirmed my fear. Items in my cabin were moved, a notebook gone, a jacket missing. No one mentioned it, and the crew acted normal, polite, their smiles hollow. My coworkers tried to reassure me, but I could see the unease in their eyes. They sensed something too. I avoided walking alone, sticking close to the group, scanning every shadow, every corner, every reflection. The laughter and music of the ship felt like a mask, hiding the deliberate presence that had stalked me from the beginning. Every glance from strangers made my skin crawl. Every hallway seemed longer than it should be. By the time we docked, relief should have come, but it didn't. The dread followed me off the ship, lodged in my chest, whispering that the eyes hadn't gone away. The cruise had ended, but the fear didn't. The ship had left its mark, and I knew that no matter where I went, that sense of being observed and hunted would never fully leave me. Even now, long after leaving the ship, I can't shake that feeling of being watched. Every shadow, every quiet corner, every reflective surface makes my pulse spike. I replay the hallways, the flickering lights, the whispers in my mind, and I can still see him. The man leaning against the railing, calm, patient, deliberate. Part of me wants to tell myself it was coincidence, that fear made me see things that weren't real. But the moved items, the missing jacket, the deliberate presence stalking me, that was real. I've stopped trusting strangers on trips. Even in crowded airports or bustling streets, I feel eyes tracking me, calculating, waiting. The cruise should have been a vacation, a release from stress, but it became a lesson in how quickly ordinary moments can turn threatening, how someone's quiet attention can feel like a trap. I sometimes wonder if he is still out there, waiting for the next person foolish enough to wander alone, to let their guard down. The ship, full of laughter and music, felt alive in ways I couldn't understand, and it left a mark that followed me home. Even now, when I close my eyes, I hear faint echoes of footsteps in empty hallways, whispers along corridors, reminders that the terror didn't end when I left. And I wonder, if I returned, would it still be waiting? Or is it already following me, patient, deliberate, unseen, proving that some fears never truly end, no matter how far you run? I remember that night as if it had happened yesterday. The ship was quiet, the kind of silence that feels unnatural when everyone else is supposed to be asleep. The decks were empty, washed in the cold glow of the ship's lights, reflecting off the dark, restless ocean. I was leaning against the railing, trying to clear my head, when I noticed movement near the lifeboats, someone, or something, sliding just beyond the shadows. I told myself it was a crew member on duty, that the distance and lighting made them seem strange. But the more I watched, the more I realized the figure wasn't doing anything routine. It was just standing, perfectly still, watching. My pulse quickened, a tight knot forming in my chest. I was traveling with a friend, and when I went back to the cabin, I told them about it. They laughed it off at first, but even they glanced toward the windows nervously. Later that night, I stepped out for some air again, and the figure was closer, leaning against a railing above me, motionless. Every instinct screamed at me that something wasn't right. When I returned to my cabin, the door was slightly ajar. I was sure I had locked it. My hands shook as I pushed it closed and double-locked it, but the feeling of being watched lingered. Somewhere on that ship, someone was tracking me, studying my routines, waiting for the perfect moment. And I knew then that my supposed vacation was no longer safe. The ship that promised freedom and escape had become a cage, and I was its prey. The next day, the unease didn't fade. The ship buzzed with activity, music, laughter, and announcements, but I felt like I was moving through a different world. Every glance toward the deck, every shadow in the lounge, made my stomach twist. My friend tried to distract me, suggesting we explore or join activities, but even in crowds, I felt exposed, like the figure was still out there, watching, calculating. Small things started to add up. My belongings in the cabin were slightly moved, shoes shifted, a notebook I'd left on the table missing a page. When I called the front desk to ask if anyone had been in the cabin, they assured me everything was fine, but the calm in their voices only heightened my paranoia. That afternoon, I wandered to the upper deck alone, thinking the fresh air might help. The ocean stretched endlessly, dark and heavy, waves crashing against the hull, but the calm was deceptive. From the corner of my eye, I saw the figure again, just standing motionless near the lifeboats. I blinked, and it was gone. My chest tightened. The ship, with all its passengers, suddenly felt like a labyrinth, designed to isolate me, every turn pre-planned by someone who had studied my movements. By evening, the stalking escalated. I heard soft steps outside my cabin door, light but deliberate. When I looked through the peephole, no one was there, but a folded note had slipped underneath, written in uneven, jagged letters, "You're not alone." My hands shook, my heart racing. I started noticing shadows along corridors, doors that should have been closed left slightly ajar, and reflections in polished railings that seemed wrong. The crew member I had noticed before now appeared in different areas, always just at the edge of my vision, disappearing when I looked directly. By nightfall, I understood the terrifying truth. This was no random presence. Someone or something was stalking me patiently, deliberately, inside the supposedly safe walls of the ship. That night, I couldn't stay in my cabin. Every sound, the hum of the engines, the faint creak of the hull, the soft drip of water somewhere, made my nerves taut. I stepped into the hallway, trying to steady my breath, and saw him. The figure, standing at the far end, perfectly still, eyes locked on me. My chest tightened, adrenaline spiking. I wanted to run, but my legs refused to obey. Then came the footsteps behind me, slow, deliberate, echoing against the walls, matching mine exactly. I spun around. Empty corridor. My pulse thundered. I ran, heart pounding, toward the stairwell, hoping to find a safe spot, or at least a crowd. But the ship seemed to twist unnaturally. Hallways stretched, doors opened onto walls, staircases ended abruptly, as if the ship itself was conspiring against me. I stumbled onto the upper deck, rain beginning to fall, waves crashing against the railing. And there he was again, leaning casually on the rail, as if he had been waiting. Shadows moved behind him, silent, deliberate, almost like other passengers, but impossibly still. My breath caught. I realized then that every step I'd taken had been watched, anticipated. The whisper came next, soft, chilling, "You can't hide." I froze. The realization hit me like a wave. There was no escaping this. Every corridor, every deck, every reflection was a trap. I was entirely exposed, utterly powerless. The fear wasn't random, it was calculated. The ship, once a place of vacation and freedom, had become a labyrinth of terror, designed for one purpose: to make me understand just how small, vulnerable, and hunted I really was. By the time the storm that had rolled in calmed, I was a wreck. The cold wind stung my wet skin, but it did nothing to ease the tension pressing against my chest. Every creak of the ship, every distant laugh or footstep, felt amplified, filled with hidden intent. I stayed huddled near the railing, heart hammering, unsure if I'd ever be safe again. In the morning, small details confirmed my worst fears. My cabin had been tampered with, drawers slightly open, items missing or moved. My friend tried to reassure me, but the unease in their eyes betrayed them. The crew acted normally, polite and professional, but the hollow perfection of their smiles only made me more certain that someone had been inside, watching, waiting. Throughout the rest of the cruise, I avoided being alone, sticking close to my friend, scanning every shadow, every hallway, every reflection. Even the laughter and music of the ship felt like a mask, hiding the calculated presence that had stalked relief should have come, but it didn't. The dread followed me off the ship, lodged in my chest, whispering that the figure hadn't gone away. The cruise had ended, but the fear didn't. The ship had claimed a mark on me, and no matter how far I went, I knew I would carry it with me forever. Even now, I can't escape that cruise ship in my mind. Every shadow, every creak of wood, every reflection reminds me of that figure, patient and deliberate, watching me from the edges of my vision. Part of me wants to tell myself it was imagination, but the moved items, the tampered cabin, the whispers that felt so real, that part was undeniable. I've stopped traveling alone, stopped trusting strangers, even in crowded places. The cruise should have been a vacation, a moment of freedom, but it became a lesson in how quickly ordinary moments can turn dangerous. Someone's quiet attention can feel like a trap, and the ship itself, with all its lights and music, became a labyrinth designed to make me vulnerable. Sometimes I wonder if he, or they, are still out there, watching other passengers, waiting for someone careless enough to wander alone. The memory of those silent, deliberate footsteps, the shadow that mirrored mine, the cold gaze at the railing, stays with me. It doesn't fade. Even now, when I see a reflection or hear faint echoes of footsteps in a quiet hallway, I can't help but remember that night. I know the fear didn't end when I left the ship, and the worst part, I'm not sure it ever will. Some presences don't leave, they follow, patient, deliberate, unseen, reminding you that danger can hide in plain sight, and sometimes there's no true escape.